Good afternoon and a happy Lutsango holiday to all. It's a new chapter in Eswatini's calendar. Today marks the inaugural celebration of this national occasion. Whether you're taking the day to reflect, to celebrate, or simply unwind, we've got you covered with the latest in business as well as the markets per usual. On Market View today, here's our agenda. Now, business news, opportunities in the bee industry. The buzz around beekeeping is growing. With vast untapped potential, the industry presents a golden opportunity for farmers. Vusinkambule, interim vice chairperson of the Bee Industry Committee, shares insights on building sustainable businesses in the space, and Nosiwe Ndlangamandla will report. In our Enterprise Watch segment, the economic power of tradition and cultural festivals, I beg your pardon, like Bukanu, Umhlanga, the reed dance, as well as Ingwala, a modern grand spectacles. They're economic catalysts. Economist Sarah Lesbia is going to join us to explore how businesses can capitalize on these national events to boost revenue as well as to expand their reach. In our market analysis, Sanele will join us again, help us see the Wall Street insights as they do as economists. He will decipher the numbers of the day from the trading floors to Wall Street to the pulse of local markets. Let's start by our business news. Look at our business news today. There is still plenty of opportunities in the bee industry as it has not yet been fully explored in the country. Now, this has been said by the Bee Industry Interim Committee Vice Chairperson Vusinkambule. He was giving advice on how farmers in this sector can build sustainable businesses.
The vice chairperson has said currently the country has about 1,000 bee farmers. He continues to say that most of them are still supplying the informal sector and they are working to formalize their businesses as they want to sell to bigger retailers.
Kwanyalo balimi nasigcina libalo lwethu belikhombisa ukuthi bayinkulungwane. Ngalokuthi kukhona bangenako esikhatsini eside kukhona labaphumako futhi. Imarket ke iningi ke thina nje silana siyalidzinga luju kakhulu lebafuyi lelichamuka etindaweni etehlukahlukene etelive. Kwanyalo uthine sithengisela i-informal market. Tingcinamba lesidibana nato ngilokuthi laba etitolo baye bakhale ngokuthi labantu bathi luju selonakele nangabe seli-crystallizile. Kanti lokucrystallize kuyindlela letsite yeluju ukuthi litivikele ukuthi lingonakali. Utawukhumbula ke mntu ukuthi luju aliboli. So na ulibona esitolo nje lomile kusho ukuthi licrystallizile.
He has further said in his personal business, he has spent over 200,000 emalangeni in buying processing equipment alone. He advises farmers who want to formalize their businesses to start small and establish a banking history so that they will be able to borrow loans to formalize their businesses. He further says there is a need to educate consumers about honey, especially because some assume it is spoiled when it has crystallized. He adds that this has a negative impact on their businesses as people tend not to buy.
I-advice yami ingathi labalimi abaqale kancane. But nabaqala kancane babe nako lokuthi bawavulela ama-account emabhange. But okhona ukuthi babe bankable. Ngoba le equipment lofuna ukuthi uyithenge kufuna ukuthi ube uhambe ufuna imali kuphi ebhange. Libhange litawubona ukuthi uqale phi wena. Seliyabona ukuthi usofuna ukuthuthuka nyalo usuyele esigaba lesi ungene lesinye isigaba sesingakunika le mali nalokuthi ke ube nayo le link nale market le formal lokusho ukuthi nje nangabe nje ungumlimi sesingakwendela icontract thina singulijile uthi awusupplier thina na usupplier ke ngale luju sesiyakhona lokuthi thine sekubhalela nalencwadi so yakhona lapho sinelibhange selingakukhuphulele umkhicido wakho.
The issue of standards is another challenge that prevents owners of businesses in this sector to be able to sell to bigger retailers. In an effort to ensure small-scale businesses meet the required standards, the Ministry of Commerce, Industry and Trade and the Eswatini Standards Authority have introduced the Ingelo certification scheme, which will be affordable for such businesses and help them in market access. For Market View, Nelson Ndlangamandla from Inkosi Nzinisa Mbabane.
In the international front, DeepSeek, TikTok, CapCut, Shein, Temu, BYD, DJY, Huawei. Chinese technology is everywhere, and in many areas, the country is challenging the former high-tech powerhouses. It's all down to an ambitious plan China set out 10 years ago. Now, the Made in China 2025 project vowed to turn China from the world's factory to the world's innovator.
The rise of Chinese AI chatbot DeepSeek has taken the world by storm. But it's part of a wider trend. Chinese apps are rising up the charts around the world. TikTok, CapCut, Shein, Temu, to name a few. And it's not just on our phones. China is becoming dominant in many other areas of tech. Look at cars. It's overtaken the previous epicenters of motoring, selling more than any other country, thanks to hit electric car makers like BYD. A lot of this success comes from China being the world's biggest battery maker now too. And solar panels. China's responsible for an estimated 80 to 95% of the global supply chain. By 2028, it's predicted that 60% of the world's renewable energy will be generated in China. In drones too, China rules the skies. Next time you hear that buzzing above your head, there's a 70% chance it's a DJI drone made in the city of Shenzhen. 3 of the world's top 10 drone makers are Chinese. In the futuristic world of quantum computers, Chinese scientists publish more quantum-related research papers annually than any other country. And they're even ahead of the general leaders, the US, in some areas of quantum computing development. And it's the same picture in AI. Chinese AI firms now issue more patents than any other country, and the rise of DeepSeek shows it's capable of challenging the dominant US giants with products too.
A Chinese company should be a wake-up call for our industries that we need to be laser-focused on competing to win.
TikTok too has taken the West by surprise. It's the first non-US social network to succeed in the last 10 years. Its enormous success is under the spotlight though, and under threat from potential intervention by the US on national security grounds. But Shein and Temu are proving worthy challenges in e-commerce now too, thanks to combining China's cheap goods with innovative app technology. But China hasn't succeeded in all its 2025 goals. It's still years behind other countries in chip making, with progress set to get even worse thanks to more sanctions and controls. Plus, the US government and private firms are throwing hundreds of billions of dollars into staying ahead in chip tech.
This increased research and development funding is going to ensure the United States leads the world in the industries of the future.
And in January, the US celebrated a commitment from tech giants to invest a potential $500 billion into infrastructure for AI.
And it's all taking place right here in America.
Other industrialized countries like Germany and Japan have also launched counter plans too. But there's no doubt that a new high-tech leader has emerged with big ambitions, deep pockets, and plenty of patience.
And that is how we close the curtain for our business news. Sonal Espia is in studio. He will chime into how our cultural events help catalyze the economic transformation of the Kingdom of Eswatini after the break.
Eswatini TV has signed a code of conduct that is enforced by the Eswatini Communications Commission. We are committed to reporting news that is accurate, comment that is fair, and programming that does not amount to hate speech or the description of gratuitous violence or explicit sex. For any complaints of our programming, please contact us on 2411-9600 or email info@eswatinitv.co.za. You can also contact the Eswatini Communications Commission on 2406-7000 or write a letter to ECCOM on PO Box 7811 Mbabane. Email address is info@ecom.org.sz.
When you choose your adventures, you do so with an open heart, and a desire for the unexpected. You embark on journeys to discover new worlds, full of wonder. You choose a path to awaken your senses, a world to make you look up and realize just how inspiring this life can be. Arrive and awaken your heart. Explore life in ways only thought possible in your dreams. Discover just how far you go to expand your understanding of life's greatest mysteries. There's just one place on this planet with so much to offer. Now is the time for you to have the royal experience.
Welcome back to the program. Traditional events. Let's explore today the national events like the recent Bukano Festival, their significant impact on the economic stability of the Kingdom of Eswatini. These cultural celebrations like Umhlanga and Ingwala have all become a cornerstone of the economy. Now, with businesses across the country reporting increased sales as well as a rise in tourism, the traditional celebrations are more than just cultural events. They are a powerful driver of economic activity. We're now joined by economist Sanele Svia. He's going to share his advice on how local businesses can continue to leverage on the events to grow their revenue as well as to expand their reach. Sanele, good afternoon. Welcome to the program. I want us to truly understand what really happens here, because it's often a conversation now. We always hear Bukano, Umhlanga, Ingwala, all of them injecting millions in the economy of Eswatini. But when we strip away all the fanfare, how much of that wealth really trickles down to small businesses in particular?
So, good afternoon, Mr. Nxumalo, and thank you for having me. So when you look at such events, Mr. Nxumalo, it becomes an opportunity both for your large scale and your more small scale industries. In terms of the large scales, Mr. Nxumalo, if you look at the figures, when you look at the tourism figures, Eswatini's major exports and services is actually tourism. That's what we're exporting a lot, and it tends to peak around these industries, around these times where you have these traditional events. It tends to peak around Bukano, it tends to peak around Ingwala, and it also tends to peak around Umhlanga, those Umhlanga celebrations. So when that happens, and another interesting thing that you note is not only then do we have one of these one-day type of visits, transit visits within the tourism, but when you look at around these days, people tend to stay quite a bit longer in the kingdom. That's during your Bukano holiday, during Umhlanga, and during Lusekwane and Ingwala, and then also around bushfire. That's when you have a lot of people staying. So those would be the formal that would be the formal impacts in terms of economic activity, ensuring that we continue to drive growth using the cultural activities, because they're not only just culture. It's one of the things that we export to the world. And then in terms of the trickling down effect, so what you note during these events, Mr. Nxumalo, is the informal sector does boom a lot. It does boom because that's where you'd find quite a lot of people selling to the Maswati that'll be there. So that's money that goes directly to the small business enterprises. And then also you'd see the larger chains coming in to also support and sell some of their commodities there. And then again, you will see that not only is it becoming just an issue of being able to sell something right now, it's also an issue of being able to advertise to the throngs of people that are there. So, there's no better way to reach people than to reach them live when they are right here in front of you.
Yeah. It's interesting because you do mention that, in fact, it has been proven that this is the biggest gainer in terms of our economy in Eswatini, tourism. The reality of the situation then says these people clearly don't have homes here. which means they don't have food that is already stored. And I can, assume that big retailers, hotels become the most dominant, beneficiaries of these celebrations and activities. Now, realistically speaking, how can then small and medium enterprises carve out their own path or share of this economic pie?
So, like I've already said, small-scale industries or businesses really do benefit from this because predominantly at the activity, at the event, they're usually the ones who are doing the selling of everything from your beads to the food that people are going to eat. And when you look at around those issues with people who are coming from abroad, that's what they want to get a taste of, the taste of Eswatini, not food you'll go and buy at one of those big retail or retail establishments, those retail chains, because that's something you can get even regardless of wherever you are. There is one of those big retail chains. So when people come in, they're looking for a unique experience, and that's what small-scale businesses should be looking to leverage, making sure you create this unique experience for these visitors that are coming into the country, because then that way you're able to cover up your own clientele, and that way you're able to grow your business around that time.
So we are advising them to really look out, perhaps, look away from perhaps their traditional scope of doing business. I mean, this past weekend we saw people doing nails, and I would categorize that as, traditional. I think that is pretty dominant with or without these events. But we also saw people charging phones. But the question in my head was, there's what do they, power banks now? But a lot of people were complaining about their batteries being dead, and so there were a few people who were providing those sort of services. What does it really take to, think outside of the box? And, I can already see this person who came with a charging port really hit the jackpot here.
Most definitely, because when you speak of power banks, I can't remember the last time I saw one. So it's an innovation that came
the good ones are expensive.
Oh, yeah.
And it is said they kill your phones and your battery, so it makes sense to charge it on.
So people are not choosing them, right? Yeah. So it's all about those doing that, looking into a niche business. When you look at a niche business, it's usually one of those things that are there right there in front of your eyes, and just nobody is seeing them. And then you do that. So that comes with a bit of market research, because I'm assuming that this person actually went there at some point and they noticed that, people just don't have access to charging ports when they're here, and they're here the whole day. They're taking photos, and their batteries are getting consumed at very large, at a very high speed. So that's what you do. You look for a niche. And then another thing I've always noticed was, we don't have that Eswatini experience in this country, which is something that needs to be created. The people around Tlane, around Buhleni, I would expect them to somehow create this local experience for people who would be there. For example, have you ever been to South Africa? Oh, I know you've been.
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah.
So, think around why you want to travel and go to Diepskloof, right?
The culture of Diepskloof is quite dominant and hard to neglect.
Exactly.
You can feel it when you get there.
Exactly.
Beyond just the costume, which I think for us has been the selling point for many a times. And, to your point, yes, it is the Marula Festival. It is always a Marula weekend, but there seems to be sort of, big focus on enjoying the brew prior to the dance by Lutsago, as opposed to creating those, small activities which could be fragmented across the whole area that could benefit the tourists, even ourselves, really, because we enjoy being together. We could literally see the dancing, the song, different type of things in different fragments. So to your point, I really get that, and perhaps they do want to look into that, these people who are always hosts. But this cash injection that we talk about, it's without a doubt that indeed it is a temporary injection, right? But is there an economist outlook on things or advice that you may give to these traders into, not only sustaining the cash injection that they get, really, but, what practical steps that they can take to extend that revenue spike beyond just the festival weekend?
So, one of the things that you need to be aware of when you go into business, Mr. Nxumalo, is yes, there will be booms and busts, right? What you need to do is understand the business model. Know that during Bokano Festival, yes, I'm going to have a huge spike in terms of my revenue. But what then you need to do is, how do I reinvest this huge spike into the business to sustain it in the long term and not be affected by these temporary fluctuations? So that's what business people need to do. Make sure that they grow their businesses, because I do believe that Bukano is not the core of why you started the business.
Absolutely.
It was probably there and existing, it had a clientele. So look at better ways you can improve your services for your clientele, expand scope so that you're able to remain sustainable post the Bukano Festival.
Right.
But yeah, we need to understand that a peak does not necessarily mean you are doing well. It's just a peak, a spike. It's a one weekend surge in sales. What you've got to work around is your normal trend, how much you're making, and then take whatever you've made during that spike and reinvest it along your normal trend.
I'm going to get into trouble for asking this one last question before we get into our market analysis, but I do want to understand. We often hear, a lot of lamentation from SMEs around the environment not being entirely conducive for them to thrive. And yet, at the same time, we always sort of, hear economists praising government for, coming up with policies that make the environment conducive enough. So let's talk policy. How do we balance this playing field now where we are saying government has done enough, particularly even for this weekend? We have seen that government has put in place some policies to make sure these people thrive, and yet there's still some lamentation. Where are the areas of improvement there? Just briefly.
No, people will always lament, Mr. Nxumalo, but yeah, we cannot underscore the fact that what you do as policy may not be a one-fit-all.
Right.
So when we say the business environment has improved, it may have improved, but on the standpoint of the investor that want to get into the ground.
Okay.
So what we now need to do, which is something that we've already been doing, push through that Citizens Empowerment Bill, and then push through that investor policy and roadmap to ensure that we really do think of the small and medium enterprise when they want to come into the play. How do we support them to grow? I think that's one thing that's been lacking. We don't have resources to allow our industries to grow. Yeah.
Okay. It's interesting indeed. I would hope that we sort of do have an approach that is very similar to that of the Eswatini International Trade Fair with these events, because there seems to be a lot of SME activity going on there. Let's get straight into our market analysis.
Eswatini TV has signed a code of conduct that is enforced by the Eswatini Communications Commission. We are committed to reporting news that is accurate, comment that is fair, and programming that does not amount to hate speech or the description of gratuitous violence or explicit sex. For any complaints of our programming, please contact us on 2411-9600 or email info@eswatinitv.co.za. You can also contact the Eswatini Communications Commission on 2406-7000 or write a letter to ECCOM on PO Box 7811 Mbabane. Email address is info@ecom.org.sz.
Welcome back to the program. With exactly 5 minutes left for our program, Sanele Sibia will help us understand the markets as they are today. Sanele, U.S. markets, everything is green there, which is an interesting juxtaposition to what is happening in Europe. Everything is red there. What is happening?
Thank you, Mr. Nxumalo. So what we're seeing in terms of the American markets was that type of rebound towards, when we're waiting for that NFP data. And for some time, we did see that the Trump policies were taking effect before then, now penduluming back. So that we should expect that for in today's trade, we should see the U.S. markets taking a tumble because it's quite of a bit, it's quite a hard stance to balance between what Trump is going to do now and what he's going to do next. So then across the pond in Europe, what we see there again is that overall subdued activity, even though we did in the morning see some slight increases in terms of those share prices, with Europe expected to ramp up their defense spending. But because of that erratic implementation of the Trump policies, there's a lot of uncertainty. And we do know that Trump is eyeing adding some tariffs on European imported commodities. And then when you move across the pond, across the Atlantic now to those Asian markets. Again, subdued activity, mainly because we're seeing that in deflationary spiral coming back into China, both from a consumer side and a producer side, and also the tariffs, they're really taking a hit, quite a knock on the mainland. So it's only Japan that remains relatively positive, purely because of those relations with the US. But we do know that they're also on a jittery mode. Coming down to South Africa, again, there is that hit being taken by markets, and we do expect that the budget, if everything goes well, should actually be tabled this week. And then again, there's that erratic implementation of the Trump policies coming into effect there, just drawing the JSE down some 700 points, because it's relatively difficult to plan now, Mr. Nxumalo, with what Trump is doing. You wake up today, there's tariffs, tomorrow they're frozen, that type of thing. And then when you move into our commodities, because the local markets are closed, so if we move into our commodities, again, we can see gold continuing to reflect that uncertainty around the Trump policies, but coming down closer to that 2.9. And then Brent crude still relatively on that 69 mark, because we do expect an increase in output while we're seeing that subdued demand coming through from China. And then in terms of our currencies, we can see there is a bit of a relative weakness of the Lilangeni against all major currencies. So that's entirely because when we look at the trade dynamics, and we know that South Africa is on a head-on collision roll with the US, so that's why with everything that's happening across the globe, so we're relatively on a stronger point, but we've shown some signs of weakness today because of those trade relations with Europe looking insular to ramp up their defense spending. That's why we're seeing the euro performing relatively well there.
Thank you so much for your insights, and we hope that as our investors are at home, and I would doubt they're really sitting at home enjoying the holiday. I'm sure they're on their computers, figuring how to invest and where to invest, and I'm sure these insights have helped them make better informed decisions. This has been the Market View edition of this Monday. It is the Lutsango inaugural holiday. Have yourself a good afternoon and a safe one. Bye-bye.